Dave Byron was a fantastic frontman. He helped to forge the Heep sound, the original man there, flamboyant on-stage presence, astonishing vocals.
Part of Uriah Heep's real identity, and as such, as we proved later, he was irreplaceable. You don't very often find people that are that unique.
Firstly, he was a rock star, and he acted like that. And he had the whole persona which went with being a rock star in the 1970s. Secondly, he had charisma. He was the sort of person who on stage commanded your attention. He looked like he belonged there.
I was only 17, fell in love with a gypsy queen. She told me, oh no.
And thirdly, he could sing, and boy could he sing. He had a tremendous voice, and he put all those aspects together, and you'd come up with somebody who should have been renowned and acclaimed as one of the legends of the era.
David was very good. I mean, he's a good singer.
Oh yeah, you know, he was a peacock, man. You know, his feathers come up and he was at home, you know. But then I have to say, all power to all of us. We all felt like that.
He was a consummate showman. He loved the spotlight. He could work a crowd like no one else. And of course, he was also brilliant technically at the microphone.
Very heavy, very umble, to give it its Cockney title, was Uriah Heep's first album. And it was a tentative step, an introduction into the world of a band who had so much to offer and so much potential.
Well, some people don't like Very Eavy, Very Umble. I think it's a fantastic album. I think it's an album that has stood the test of time, probably better than a lot of the other early albums.
The first album was a distillation of all the best that they'd been recording for a long period of time. So I think it was a good album. I think it was a very good debut album.
I don't think we knew where we were going, and certainly the lineup of the band wasn't completed by then, but yeah, I thought it was a convincing debut. I thought it was a powerful first record, and that's exactly what it was, a first record.
It's not as conceptual, well, it's not a conceptual album, period, but it is a very good collection of songs.
Today it wouldn't work because it's not commercial enough, and it was too disjointed. There were many different styles on the record, but in those days that was okay. You know, we were still finding our musical feet.
Mick has told me many times since then that how strongly influenced they were by the mega American band Vanilla Fudge, with the Hammond organ and that harmony with the slow vibrato on the vocals, that style. And it's very apparent on Very Heavy, Very Umble.
I always remember going to rehearsal in Leicester Square, went down into a basement and they were rehearsing. It's the first time I heard Gypsy, and I went, oh wow, I mean, you know, that is it. That is Uriah Heep.
There are two standout tracks on that record. The opening track, Gypsy, which is very gothic, and by gothic I don't mean gothic in the musical sense as we know it today, but very dark and mysterious. And if you read the lyrics are certainly not about being happy-go-lucky or being on the road. They're very distinctive and very different.
And it became a underground hit song, and still is on the set list for Uriah Heep as one of the greatest hits they ever had.
One day I will go to him, strong enough to bottom with, kind of a man, he'll understand.
The other superb track on the album is Come Away Melinda. Now that's not a Uriah Heep original. It was done by Harry Belafonte, it was done by Judy Collins, it was also done by UFO, interestingly enough. But to my way of thinking, it was Uriah Heep which gave it its shape and its form. It's Uriah Heep's version which has become renowned today.
That
There were some very, very clever little timing changes, such as on Real Turned On, but an interesting point to note is that actually there were no Ken Hensley songs on this first album, or certainly none that were credited. I'm sure he had a lot to do with input and ideas, but this is stark contrast to later work by the band, where the friction started to come in because of his dominance in the songwriting department.
Not a great album overall. It also had Dream Mare, which was slightly psychedelic, but really showed the band trying to find a route and a way forward, which they were subsequently to do. However, it was certainly an intriguing and an interesting introduction, and if you compare it to what was going on, for instance, in the world of Deep Purple, possibly a lot more adventurous.
Sleepless nights that last a lifetime, boosted by my head. Do not be sad, then disaster, wish that I were dead. Looking for the end of darkness, seeking out the day. For escape with speed of thought, bearing me away.
Without doubt, Byron is the most underrated frontman ever to come out of the British Isles.
It actually irks me how underrated he was, particularly by the British press.
The media liked to laugh at them for so long, and because of that, David Byron himself, as far as the media was concerned, was in a band who were a waste of time. They were the poor man's Deep Purple, as they were called on so many occasions.
But I do think he's an underrated frontman. I think he was very, very powerful as the figurehead of Uriah Heep.
David was a terrific singer. The problem he had was that he didn't have a very powerful voice, so on stage he was always fighting against the loudest band in the world, and I always suspected that Ken kept turning things up to make it more difficult for David. But the remarkable thing is that David and Ken's voices were almost identical, and I reckon I was one of the few people that could act, when we were in the studio, I could tell which was David and which was Ken. So the match of their two voices was sensational.
He was right up there with Ozzy, Robert Plant, Ian Gillan.
Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, that kind of singers. And I think he never got the credits for that. So those two things, his incredible voice and his stage performance, made Uriah Heep to a really top band.
Especially in the heyday of the 72, 73 period, and before the drugs and alcohol really kicked in and started causing problems.
He was fantastic from the smallest club to the hugest stadium. And I think it's so sad how underrated he was. He really was one of the best rock frontmen that we've ever produced. Is Mick Box underrated as a guitarist? Well, for my money, he is the single most underrated rock guitarist in Britain.
I mean, you listen to anything he's played over the years in the studio, and especially in his live shows. You know, he has a finesse about him that very few guitar players can actually pull off.
It's fun, you know. Basically, audiences are the same. It's just that in America you can play to a lot more of them. You know, because you've got bigger venues and everything. You know. Yeah.
I think Mick is a terrific showman. I think he's a good guitarist. He's not a great guitarist. He'll kill me for saying that.
You know, whilst I could probably pick out 1,000 guitar players that actually are technically better than Mick, I think Mick was the perfect guitar player for Uriah Heep.
He's incredibly underrated as a wah-wah player. I believe in one reader's poll for one musical journal, he was voted the second best wah-wah guitarist in the world, where the first was Jimi Hendrix. And Mick always said to me, well, mate, blimey, he said, number 2 to Jimi Hendrix can't be bad.
I mean, the biggest compliment I've had as a guitarist from a lot of people that talk to me is just like they can pick out my solos anywhere, anytime, you know, they can just pick them out, which is fabulous, you know. And whether that's from the sound of it, or the wah-wah or whatever it is, they just know it's you, and that's the best compliment you can have, really.
He's great on stage, the wonderful movements he does to the crowd.
I used to do a lot of clever little left-hand trills and things, you know, which in clubs and universities you can see it happening, you know, and people can appreciate the fact you're doing it, you know. But, you know, with 20,000 people, they can't see it, so I used to give it all this, hand in the air, and do all the trills so everyone could see it, you know. Look, I am now showing off. Right, I used to do all that sort of stuff. That's how all that sort of stuff developed, you know, from those moments on.
Mick is not a particularly great musician. I mean, he's a good musician, he knows what he's doing. But, you know, I had occasion when I used to go down in the studio and play on the piano the chords he was playing and say, Mick, that's not what you're playing, you know, you should, oh, I didn't realise, you know. So he frequently needed a bit of guidance. He was a great team member.
He's a great member of Uriah Heep. It's his band from the start. And underrated. I mean, you know, it's frightening how underrated he is.
I'm not sure if he is. I think that many people who are into rock guitar music know that he is a great guitarist, because he's really got his own sound, a very special way of guitar playing.
But what he doesn't have is the superstar status that people like Ritchie Blackmore had or Jimmy Page had. But as a proficient guitar player, he was fantastic. And as a wah-wah guitar player, absolutely second to none in the hard rock field.
And again, it comes back to one thing. Were he not in Uriah Heep, if he were in another band which had a greater respect and reputation, his standing as one of the all-time greats would be unchallenged, as it should be. By the time Uriah Heep got to their second album, they decided to do something extremely experimental. They went for a very lengthy, epic track, which was the title, Salisbury.
I have to be honest, I thought it was a little bit fussy at times. A Byron box Hensley song when they were at their utmost teamwork. So it worked very, very well.
Around that time, a number of bands were experimenting with either full orchestras or with orchestral elements. Pink Floyd did a wonderful job with Atom Heart Mother, which actually went to #1 in the album charts. Salisbury was a great triumph as a piece. It blended together perfectly, probably better than any other contemporary experiments.
There are moments in it which tend to meander a little bit, as if the band was still trying to think of a reason to have such a long track. But overall, it's a very epic piece of music, very orchestral and very driven. And it's one of the best things that Uriah Heep were ever to do.
I think most composers have somewhere in their hearts a desire to be like the great classical composers, you know, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky and so on. So I guess it was my first attempt at being expansive, you know, and bringing in an orchestra and all this other stuff. It was a little grandiose, a little pompous, and it's hard for me to listen to now because there's so many mistakes on it, but I think it was an important stepping stone for the band as far as developing our music was concerned.
Salisbury itself was a mistake. It was a very long piece of music. We got John Fiddy to do the arrangement. I never really thought it worked. It was a little pretentious. A rock band with an orchestra, it to me didn't really work.
I think Salisbury as an album didn't work as well actually as Very Eavy, Very Umble, but Salisbury as the classical piece of music, which was nearly 17 minutes worth, was a fantastic attempt. And I think out of all of the classical mixes or classical rock mixes, Salisbury is probably the one that actually works best of all when you listen to it in depth.
For many Uriah Heep fans, Salisbury's actually their favourite album. You've got a wonderful start with Bird of Prey, Time to Live's a great song, Lady in Black of course has gone on to become, for whatever reason, very much a favourite. And on the reverse side you've got The Whole of Salisbury, which was a really successful experiment with orchestra, so it still is a great album.
We had a real problem with the cover. Phillips decided to do the cover for us, which is something that was a big mistake. We weren't happy with it, and we decided that we would always do our own covers from that point onward.
The Salisbury album, to my way of thinking, has three highlights. The title track, the epic, the momentous occasion which really brings the whole album to a crescendo. Bird of Prey, which lives up to its title because it swoops and dives and has a tremendous interplay between Mick and Ken Hensley on guitar and keyboards respectively. And then there's Lady in Black, which is one of the epics. So simple, so straightforward, very acoustic. It's become a huge anthem, especially in Germany, where it's been a hit on more than one occasion.
I don't think there can be a German alive over the age of 40 that doesn't have a copy of this track.
2 chords and a chorus with no words in it. I mean, that way to go.
And Salisbury as an album moved the band forward. They started to take shape, they started to get those little cliches in. And I use the word cliche because later on they were certainly to become that for Uriah Heep, but at that point they were introducing identity, the multi-stepped harmonies, the melodies, the feeling of something really heavy but something really accessible. So Salisbury was definitely a step forward and a significant one.
It was an interim album. It wasn't really, it moved us forward, but it wasn't the greatest of the albums. I've never regarded Salisbury as being particularly representative or successful. It had some good tracks on it, but the saving grace was Lady in Black.
By the time they got to Look at Yourself, they had more of a shape to their sound. Not quite there, but certainly in that area.
Only 7 tracks, but they were all stonkers. Ken Hensley was really coming into his own as a songwriter now, from the limited amount of or no songwriting work that he'd done on the first album.
I think you can find, even in the most negative things about Uriah Heep's history, even in the songs I don't like, even in the albums I'm not too fond of, there's still something incredibly positive about it, and a reason to celebrate, because it was a stepping stone for the band. It was a progressive thing for the band.
I think it was the record that put them on the map as far as America was concerned, and it was definitely a good piece of hard rock mixed with progressive rock. It's a great album. It's a great album to listen to today, and probably one of their heaviest albums in actual fact.
There is no filler on that album, and it's really rocking. It's really into the music Uriah Heep was trying to develop. So, another classic really.
And Look at Yourself itself, the opening track, the title track, is the one, apart from July Morning, that really shows they're getting there, because there's everything you want from Uriah Heep. It's got a little driving rhythm, it's got melody, and it's got those harmonies, and it's got some wonderful guitar performances from Mick Boggs. By the time Uriah Heep came to the third album, Look at Yourself, they really had started to become confident with themselves and with their identity. And there's one track on Look at Yourself which stands head and shoulders above everything else on that record and almost everything Uriah Heep have ever done, July Morning.
July Morning is 3 different songs that they put together, and I used to infuriate them by telling them that it didn't have a lyric, because it doesn't really have a lyric. The basic lyric is "There I was on a July morning." That's all, that's the lyric. When I'm working with bands today, I say, you know, don't throw away songs that haven't quite made it, because Uriah Heep actually took 3 songs that weren't quite good enough, put them together, and of course when you hear July Morning you'd have no idea, you would never know it was 3 different components, but it is.
With the stars night behind me, oh yeah. Got a road of my own. With the day in the resolution, I'll be looking for you.
It's an anthem, and I think that it's actually in the vein of Deep Purple's Child in Time, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, of course.
The typical Uriah Heep hallmark in this song is that it starts off very slow, with emotional singing from David Byron, this Hammond organ, and then it bursts out.
Oh yeah, yeah. Got a road of my own. The day when the resolution, I'll be looking for you. La 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 la.
Lyrically, I think it tells a very colourful story, and so I think that it's a very complete song. It's a rock song, it's a ballad, it's many different things rolled into one, and certainly a song which I still love to play live.
It worked wonderfully well at the time, and 35 years later the band still play it as a showcase in the set, and it still works gorgeously.
It's one of the great epics of all time. And again, had it been performed by a band who had a little more respect and reputation with the media, it probably would have a greater standing and stature today, and could, and I only say could, even rival Stairway to Heaven as the ultimate rock epic.
Ken Hensley, as a writer and a composer, he was a, and still is, a phenomenon.
The biggest selling records that the band ever had, by and large, were written by Ken Hensley.
Ken Hensley was the other arm of Uriah Heep's compositional power and access. You had Mick Boggs and you had Ken Hensley. Now, Mick Boggs understated, Ken Hensley never understated, he over-elaborated. And to some extent that was always his Achilles heel.
He was never going to be a flamboyant, over-the-top showman because he didn't have the technical expertise. But he had a wonderful gift for knowing exactly what the song required and delivering just that and no more.
I think Ken was a very good writer for Uriah Heep. I think it's quite possible that if it weren't for Uriah Heep, his songs would never have become successful. I think the key mark is, or the hallmark is that, of course, he didn't write songs successfully for other people. So he's not a great songwriter, but then maybe Uriah Heep didn't need songs, they needed material. And there's no question about it, all the best tracks that Uriah Heep ever recorded were written by Ken. And the rest of the band resented that, because of course his royalty checks for his songwriting were far in excess of what they were making.
I've always written. When I was young, I used to write poetry. In fact, I only started playing a musical instrument to turn my poems into songs, which is why I don't play like anyone else. I never learned how to actually play. All I did was learn how to accompany myself.
He tended to overplay, and because he overplayed, sometimes it took away from the songs. But there's no doubt he could really play his keyboards wonderfully well. And to a great extent, it was Ken Hensley's keyboard sound which defined what Uriah Heep were all about.
Never anything too flash, just absolutely what was appropriate for Heep.
Hensley also had a sense of arrogance about him. He wanted to be the rock star as well as David Byron, and very often was.
I'm inclined to believe that writing is my gift.
Ken was a sort of person that, you know, he'd create his own little clique, if you like, whereas the rest of us were quite happy to be with each other, you know what I mean? We had no need to do any of that. And then Ken would come in and be a part of what we want to do when and if he wanted to, you know. And I can only say that in terms of later on in life when, you know, he used to have his own dressing room. But come into our dressing room to change for the last 5 minutes, you know, stuff like that, you know, whereas none of us had the need or even you know, desire to do that, you know, we just wanted to be a band, you know.
When there were the rifts in the band, they could quite easily have turned around and said, we're not going to do any more Ken Hensley songs, but I think the case would have been there would have not been any more Heep fans.
There's no question about it. He could write pop songs and he could write epics. He had that ability across the board. And I think to some extent that's what made Uriah Heep happen. But it also seemed to dominate and overshadow so much else that was going on in the band. You sometimes felt he would probably have the last say in who wrote the songs, and it would always be him.
When the time came for the band to need new songs, I always had plenty of songs available. So it started really with Salisbury, and then it kind of grew and grew and grew until every time we went to record, I always had a big bag full of songs for us to choose from.
When they went through the demons and wizard phases with all the tales of sorcery and mystical lyric styles, they were very, very well put together. His lyrics were very intelligently put together. He's an intelligent man and he's a great and prolific songwriter. And I have to mention the strong slide on Tears in My Eyes. Ken Hensley was beginning to build a reputation as quite a formidable slide player, and there weren't too many guys in this country. And that to me was the icing on the cake, the slide solo on Tears in My Eyes.
Overall, as an album, it's the moment Uriah Heep took shape, took form, took substance, and really showed they were here for the long haul. It also has a very interesting sleeve, because it's the first thing anyone says about Look at Yourself. Oh yes, the mirror on the sleeve. What a clever and simple idea.
Demons and Wizards from 1972 was definitely a career highlight for the band. It was their 4th studio album and remains absolutely my favourite album from the David Byron era.
It is quite magnificent from beginning to end. Everything came together, everything gelled. From the opening track, The Wizard, which is very mystical and also, again, very sharply focused, through Traveller in Time, through Circle of Hands, Easy Living, every track on that album is a masterpiece.
And then you can hear this band is young and aggressive. They lay their heart and everything in those songs. So you can hear that, you can feel that.
If you had to pick one Heep album, which one would it be?
Demons and Wizards, because it was my first and it was the one that went gold, and it gave me a chance to express my drumming, my singing, my harmonies and my songwriting.
The songs were amazing. The Wizard and Paradise, both in the key of C with detuned acoustic guitars. Ken was very fond of detuning the acoustics, and these were detuned 2 tones down to the key of C, which provides a really fat rhythm sound.
The best album they ever made, the most successful album they ever made, and the only album that was made piecemeal. All the other albums were made with the intent of going in the studio and recording enough for an album. But Demons and Wizards, we did The Wizard and Easy Living separately. Then we did some other tracks, and that became Demons and Wizards. And we think that a number of people in America thought there was some subtle underground meaning to the album, which there wasn't. It was never intended. And we called it Demons and Wizards because we had the Wizard and we just put it together that way.
It was certainly a highlight for me from a composition standpoint, because I feel that Paradise and the Spell is probably one of the best songs, combination of songs I've ever written.
The Spell is worth mentioning because this must have been a hugely satisfying exercise for the band to record. It's an epic piece of work with various movements in it. It changes tempo, it changes key, it changes time signature.
On the other side of that, when you look at what followed it, and the fact that from that point on sales began to go down, slowly but surely, I would say that it represents a pinnacle really for the band.
It also has the ultimate Uriah Heep cover artwork done by Roger Dean. This is the moment when Uriah Heep arrived.
The Wizards and Demons was an odd cover for me because it was a painted cover way back in the early 70s, when I would really describe my early work as I drew and I coloured the drawings. Magician's Birthday, Wizards and Demons, they rather pull you to something, don't they? I think I took an original take on it, but it wouldn't have been any sense me doing Flying Elephants for Magician's Birthday, I guess. I don't know, maybe it would have. But I think if they had gone to the extent of calling their album Magician's Birthday or Wizards and Demons, they had an idea they wanted to be picked up on. And I was willing to do that. I had ideas to explore in that direction, so it worked for me.
This is the moment when they stamped their mark, made their impact, and really said, we aren't just a poor man's Deep Purple, there is so much more to what we are about. And I think this album has inspired so many other bands over the years, even though sometimes they haven't admitted it.
This is a place I've never seen before, and I've been forgiven. Easy living, and I've been forgiven since you
Easy Livin is a Heep classic and a hard rock classic in my eyes.
It's less than 3 minutes, full burst of energy and melody and vocals. That's superb song.
It's wave your fists in the air. It has a tremendous sense of driving forward, great riffage, great melody, and it's very sharp and focused as well. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
There are no surprises. It's a basic shuffle in D minor, which doesn't let up from start to finish. And for me, it displays Heep at their rocking best. It's a stonking track.
If there was any justice in the world, Easy Livin would be recognised alongside Paranoid and Silver Machine and More Than a Feeling as one of the great rock singles. It was a hit on the continent, but it wasn't a hit in either the UK or the USA, and to this day I still don't understand why.
Somewhere along that lonely road I had tried to find you. Day after day on that windy road I had walked behind you. Easy living, and I've been forgiven since you've taken your place in my heart.
It was quite revolutionary for the time, I think. Stood the test of time well, Easy Livin has.
If a song is still being played on the radio after 10 years, then I think it deserves the label a classic, and I suppose it survived more than the 10-year test because I still play it live. So.
What Magician's Birthday did have was an all-time classic opener in the form of Sunrise.
They took the idea and attitude, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So they did exactly that.
The song is valid. I like the lyrics, the melodies and everything, but I think the intro of that song was what really gave it, what established it.
And then it comes into that beautiful verse, the A minor to the F to the G and back to the A minor.
It really does feel like everything is lifting. The light is dawning on you. It very much captures inspiration through dawn. And it's very difficult to do something like that, but you listen to Sunrise and you really feel like you're watching the most beautiful sunrise you've ever seen in your life. And it's very uplifting and very inspiring. And they did it very simply.
The sunrise and you.
The harmonies to me are what are the spice on the cake. It's a fantastic live number, and I think it blew a lot of people away when it first came out. Absolutely one of the best Heep songs ever.
Love and nothing more. As the sea rolls by, the one there see me cry, except sunrise. The sunrise and you.
Magician's Birthday actually confounded a lot of people because whilst it followed in the footsteps of Demons and Wizards, it was an album that worked really well in its own right. So often bands stick to a formula, they make their mark with an inspired album which really defines their career, and the next one is a huge letdown. And a lot of people were expecting that of Magician's Birthday, but it wasn't. It was actually a really fine record.
I think the band was in a rush at a time to continue the success with Demons and Wizards.
It was, by any standards, a hurried production. I think Ken, in particular, has alluded to the fact that he was not happy with how hurried it was. It seems they were rushed back into the studio.
I mean, at that point, they were under pressure. I was very careful to try and make an album at a regular interval, and they were touring and, you know, there was a lot of things going on. I think it was very hard for them to make a better album, And I don't think they succeeded. I think they tried to copy rather than create something new.
I'd say Magician's Birthday worked about 50%. It's a fairly well-known fact that I was in the process of writing the album and developing a short story to go with it, when all of a sudden we got the panic phone calls from the record company. We need the album now, we need to do da-da-da-da. So I didn't really finish writing it. So it's not complete for me.
I think Magician's Birthday was an attempt to recapture Demons and Wizards, and it almost did it, but I think it failed a little bit. It was quite a successful album. I think really the truth is that from Magician's Birthday onward it started going downhill. They never made an album, in my book, that was as good as Demons and Wizards subsequently.
But they didn't let the fans down. It's a great album. The lineup of the band was becoming very, very stable. The rhythm section of Lee and Gary Thain was absolutely rock solid by now. And there were some fantastic songs.
You had Sunrise as an opening track, which was really, really strong. You also had Magician's Birthday itself, which was a huge epic. Not similar to Salisbury in terms of the way it was structured, but similar with the fact that what they did was went for a very long piece of music, but it worked beautifully.
Let's all go to a magician's birthday. It's in a forest park, not so far away. Much to do and so much to say, while we listen to the oaken orchestra play.
It was different parts, 5 parts in total, including one which had Happy Birthday in it, which you think is going to be completely ludicrous and either hilarious or so overblown and pretentious it's going to make people cringe, but it did neither. It worked really well in its own setting. And it also had Sweet Lorraine, which is another great song, another great anthem.
All in all, a great album and a milestone for me in the band's career.
Well, the musical hallmarks of Uriah Heep, how long have we got? I mean, you could talk about those for a month.
For me, as a fan of the band, Uriah Heep had everything. They had great guitar work from Mick. They had superb compositions which were elegantly realised. They had a superb frontman. Gary Thain played inspirational bass, and Lee Kerslake is one of the great rock drummers of all time. So as a unit, all the elements were there.
First of all, it was simple songs, high energy, understandable, relatable lyrics, and very, very clear melodies.
I think the best part of Uriah Heep were the vocals. I think the guitar work was standard. I think the organ playing, keyboard playing was good but not exceptional. But I think the vocals were exceptional, and I think that when David left the band, he was never replaced.
And then you have the ultimate Uriah Heep cachet, the multi-stepped vocal harmonies. No one else really did it in that way. They were called the Beach Boys of heavy metal, and to some extent that's true, although their harmonies were slightly different. They would step them. You had them actually really going up in a choral sense that was very different to the way that the Beach Boys did it. And I am still convinced to this day that although Queen get a lot of praise, and as they deserve, for their vocal harmonies, Uriah Heep were really the pioneers of a certain style of vocal harmony that, again, they never got credit for at the time, and certainly, subconsciously maybe, influenced Queen.
Sweet rain, sweet rain.
Jumping switch. America and England are the places we like playing the most, because America is the most organised country for rock and roll, and England is our home, so we enjoy playing there. But, you know, we also enjoy playing in Europe.
We must keep them away.
Uriah Heep Live 1973. Is this one of the greatest albums from the live period or live era?
I'd say so. I'd say that Live 73, it's one of the few records from my past that I can still listen to. The energy on that record's amazing to me, and that's why I can still listen to it.
For my money, it's up there with some of the greatest live rock albums that have been recorded. The Who, Live at Leeds, Purple in Japan. It stands the test of time.
It's the best live album I've ever done. I wouldn't say it's the great live album of all time, but it probably is in many ways because, I mean, they were terrific on stage. We had this idea of recording a series of gigs and taking the best performances out of each gig. But Birmingham was it. I mean, every single song that we recorded at Birmingham was as good as we were ever going to get. And the only thing on the album that wasn't done at Birmingham was the introduction, Ladies and Gentlemen, Uriah Heep, was actually from another take, from another performance, but the rest of it was all Birmingham.
They just had a vibrant atmosphere. They had a good audience. They were obviously having fun on the night. The music was wonderfully executed, and classic stage favourites were played. I mean, everyone was on form with that one, and they did capture it live.
I remember at the time, of course, it came packaged in the great fold sleeve with the Finn Costello's pictures there. It was a lavish package. It was very exciting, but the music was even more exciting.
Gonna write a little letter, gonna mail it to my local DJ. As a ragged little record, I want my job to play. So roll over me, roll, I gotta hear it again today. You know the traffic surprise and then the jukebox blow the fuse. Hard is the rhythm and the soul keeps singing the blues. So roll over me, over and tell the cops to do.
Some people say Rock and Roll Medley was a filler. I don't think it was. It was what they kind of did for their fun and games in 1971, 72, 73.
I was great. I mean, I loved doing it. Freddie Mercury obviously liked it.
It's probably the only track in the album where Heep sound actually quite relaxed and confident. It took everybody by surprise. People who didn't know Heep, they could do something like that. But that's what Heep could do. They took all those songs, put them into a medley, made it their own, and actually had a smile on her face at the end. And if the rest of the album had lived up to what that was all about, it could have been a far better album.
Roll over Beethoven, roll over Beethoven, roll over Beethoven, yeah. Roll over Beethoven. Tell Tchaikovsky about this one. Come on. One for the money, two for the show. Do you get ready now?
Rock and Roll Medley is definitely a filler because Uriah Heep had so much to say that it used up the space that could have been used by much better original material, either on stage or on record. But I can see why a lot of the fans enjoy it, and you can see just how much fun the band had performing that from surviving filming them.
Sweet Freedom from 1973 was the band's 6th studio album in a very short space of time, and they were obviously pressurised.
Sweet Freedom was called Sweet Freedom because we'd left Mercury Records, and a lot of people don't know that.
It was following in the footsteps of two giants. Now, it could have been the third in the triumvirate, but it doesn't quite really come off. It falls flat on its face a little bit.
I think Sweet Freedom was the best studio album the band ever did. I mean, I know they were having some troubled times recording this in France, and they were recording it in the famous haunted castle that Jethro Tull had so much trouble with a little while earlier.
I think Gary was the catalyst in the band, and I think that because we were in a residential studio, he fired everybody up. I think there's a lot of balls in what we did on that album, and we had to do it in 3 weeks. We booked the Chateau for 3 weeks, so we went there, we did all the tracks, all the overdubbing, we did the mixing in England, and I think it was a distillation of everything they'd done previously. Didn't have a big hit single in it like Easy Living, but otherwise it was a very good album.
Ken Hensley was very dominant, and in some quarters there was criticism of the fact that he was becoming so dominant in the songwriting department.
I just don't think we were communicating as well as we were, and there were some other external issues that were beginning to become too important to us. Tax things and personality issues, ego problems, and financial things, which were becoming a little bit out of hand by then.
Take me across the water, 'cause I need some place to hide. I done the righteous daughter, and I showed it hurt us pride.
Stealin' for me is the album's high spot. It's just a fantastic live number, and even today on a good night, the band's performance today rivals the original studio recording. It's fantastic.
It's a sort of a Western myth type of song about which I've had absolutely no experience, and so I wrote the lyrics purely and simply from imagination, almost like I'd watched too many John Wayne movies or something, I don't know.
But it's the song itself, Stealin', starts off like July Morning. It starts off with a soft Hammond organ, a great emotional voice, the mystical lines, and it bursts out, and you can sing along with it.
Stealin' is another one of these songs that looked like it was going to become a worldwide hit, was a hit in parts of Europe, but again missed the UK and America for reasons I'll never quite understand. It was very popular on the radio, but somehow didn't translate into chart success.
The album was, the song rather, was deemed too risque for America, simply because of the line, "I done the rancher's daughter," and the Americans were no way having that. These days, of course, you'd get away with far worse, but I think it actually prevented them from having a monster hit in America with this track, which is crazy.
Gary Thain, to my way of thinking, is one of the most underrated, possibly the most underrated musician ever to be in Uriah Heep.
He was not just a backbone bass player, he was, as Hensley said, the best musician in the band. And I think he was right.
He took essential rock and roll, which is just, you know, foot to the floor, everything on 10, and added such class to it in his bass playing. And I don't think there's any other way to describe it as that. He brought just pure class to the band in his playing.
He could play anything. But apart from anything else, he also fitted into the band. He didn't stand apart. He was a virtuoso, but he was also very much a member of Uriah Heep. It's such a shame he had his addiction problem, but there again, maybe if you'd taken the addiction out of the band, you wouldn't have had the same quality of musician.
I think what he brought to the band was a spirit, a feeling, a vibe. They obviously felt comfortable with him. The lineup was stable, and there are a few better bass players.
He was a fabulous bass player. He was actually probably the best musician in the band while he was in the band. Oh yeah, no, he was a very natural musician, played great bass parts, and I think he brought a lot to the band. And I think the band suffered when he left, actually.
Is the music undergoing any changes at all? Is it, or is it pretty much a...
Well, at the moment we're up to the Wonderworld stage, and when we start recording the next album, then we'll see what comes out.
Yeah. Do you have any either plans or hopes for the future in terms of your music? There's such a lot of good rock and roll around at the moment, but
yeah.
Do you hope to go anywhere from where your records are now?
Yeah, we hope to improve all the time, obviously, and go a step further. But it's all down to sitting down and working out what we're going to do for the next album, basically.
Yeah.
At the time of Wonderworld, 1974, there was a lot of criticism that the band was starting to flag musically. It was their 7th studio album, and they were obviously pressurised into it.
Problems with Wonderworld were, one, we recorded it in Munich, and this was all done for tax purposes, which is the wrong motivation. And I'm always a believer in that wrong motivation, wrong result.
Maybe also production has got a lot to do with it. They worked with Jerry Brom from day one. He played an integral part in the band. He was a crucial member, as it were, of the Uriah Heep entourage. But you get the feeling by the time they get to Wonderworld, he's not pushing them. He's satisfied with less than 100%, and if he's satisfied, certainly the band are, which is a shame.
We were terribly disconnected. People showing up on the wrong day to do things. Nobody was focused. David's drinking was totally out of control.
Mick Box went to the studio on Saturday to find that we'd all gone home because we'd finished, and he didn't even know. So that's how organised it was. And I still don't know how it happened. I mean, it was unbelievable. You know, Mick phoned me up over the weekend and said, "What the hell's going on?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you all went home and I didn't know we'd finished." And I said, "Well, Mick, I mean, we all went home. Where were you?" So that's how bad it was.
There's some very good songs on Wonderworld, but I think once again, things within the band had become so out of hand that it didn't have a chance of being really polished.
But the two poignant songs on the album that just about sum it up is one called We Got We and the I'm So Tired song of Ken Hensley. We Got We seemed to be a cry for reassurance that they were a tight unit still. And I'm So Tired, it just says it all. It's just about his weariness at life on the road. And so those two songs sum up the whole mood of the album for me.
Where can you go? Where can you go? But there is no one sure but God and lie. What did you say? What did you say? Have you been thinking about me tonight?
I knew Gary had a drug problem. I tried hard to get him to take up other things like hobbies, and I don't think Gary ever realised how good he was, and I constantly tried to encourage him and steer him away from, I suppose, a sort of depression. But in the end, he just literally couldn't function. I mean, there was no way he could have carried on the Uriah Heep. He got to a point where, you know, it was doubtful whether he could go on stage, and he died, I think, about a year later. They found him dead in the bath, so I mean, there is a very good example of success killing somebody, tragically.
Well, obviously, after Gary, we needed to replace Gary. John came very highly recommended by a lot of people, and certainly what John brought to the band was a great standard of playing, different from Gary, very different style, but that was okay.
John Wetton was a great bass player. I liked him a lot as a bass player, but you could hear and you could see that this was not Uriah Heep anymore. We knew from Demons and Wizards, Magician's Birthday and Live 73.
But he was brought in by necessity. if they'd had their real choice, I don't think Gary Thain ever would have left. Well, Gary Thain didn't leave, did he? Gary Thain was fired, but he was fired because of his heroin addiction and the problems associated with that.
He's a great player. He's an all-round great rocker. Whether or not he was absolutely suitable for Uriah Heep is debatable, but I don't think any blame can be laid at his door for that. It certainly was a new era of Uriah Heep, and some of the fans liked it, some of them, but most of them probably didn't.
If you look at John as a replacement for Gary, you're making a big mistake. You can't do that. In his own way, Gary was just like David, irreplaceable. So John was filling a big pair of shoes. I think he did a good job. I don't think John was a problem, except that he only ever viewed it as a temporary job.
In a way, he was a hired hand. You know, we paid him a lot of money. He wasn't a share. He didn't share in the incomes. He just was paid a salary. And I think he looked at it that way. He just felt that, you know, we paid him a lot of money to be in the band, and that's as far as it was ever going to go.
Return to Fantasy is one of the weakest albums that the band did, in my opinion. There are some high points on it.
But the title track itself is very much classic Uriah Heep. It has all the elements which go to make Heep what they were at the time.
But we're talking about a point in time when the band was really struggling to hold itself together.
Even the title gives away what we were trying to do. Return to Fantasy, we're going back to Demons and Wizards. We're trying to suggest that there's something mystic about the album, and there wasn't.
John Wetton came into the band, very different to Gary Thain in the fact he was much more of a progressive style of bassist.
And he'd walked in from bands like Roxy Music and King Crimson into a band that were in turmoil with substance abuse, internal feuding.
No, I think that David had progressively got into a situation where he drank too much. He was taking whatever he was taking, Valiums and uppers and so on, that was affecting his on-stage performance. He was getting more and more impossible. This was a chap that when I first met him was the nicest English gentleman you could ever meet, and would go into my office and butter up the secretaries, and everyone thought he was wonderful, and 4 or 5 years later he'd become an absolute monster.
We didn't take the time to write or rehearse it. We just kind of said, time to make a record. Ken, bring some songs, boom, do the album, finished. And I don't think we paid anywhere near enough attention to it.
As it stands, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a letdown. Better than Wonderworld, its predecessor, but still not really up to the standards they set with Demons and Wizards and Magician's Birthday. And even before that, with Look at Yourself.
I really don't think that from that point onward, we were making albums that were any more than a sort of shadow of, literally a shadow of what we'd done before.
Tell me what you do when it's over, and everyone around you is gone, gone. The our kind of people, y'all the church of the steeple, but we're all inside a hole. We got what you need.
Without a doubt, there are a number of fillers on Return to Fantasy.
Like Shady Lady and Prima Donna.
Prima Donna is almost just like a pop. It sounds like Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers or something, or one of Elton John's rockier tracks.
David wrote Prima Donna because I once said to him to stop behaving like a prima donna, and he said, "What's a prima donna?" And I explained to him, and he said, "Oh, great." So he wrote a song called Prima Donna. It wasn't a very good song. I mean, it's just, you know, again, we were getting down to the point that they were trying to compete with Ken. And for some reason, it's very interesting, they never ever wrote a song that was anything like an equal to what Ken did.
Well, when you ask me, I would have skipped Prima Donna, but I never would have skipped Shady Lady. I think Shady Lady is a really good live song. It's aggressive. Maybe there's not much vocal harmonies, not much hallmarks, if you want to say it like that. But I think it's a very strong song.
I said, Don't you think you're turning me upside down? You said, well, I don't care. I've been everywhere. And I've not been looking for you. Think you eat, maybe it was speed. Know some chicks by the time we got through. Lady, you went all your own way. Lady, you won't let go of your plan. Lady, eat me up and spit me out. Let's get started now.
Uriah Heep had much better material on that album and in the back catalogue, and really it was a waste of time to perform that as part of the stage show.
I think High and Mighty to the band at the time was a disappointment. I mean, the band had a lot of money, they had the trappings of the money, they had huge problems within the band, they had problems with the management with Jerry Bron, and of course shortly after the recording of High and Mighty, David Byron was fired because of the alcohol problems that they had.
He just became impossible, and I think that I had to make a choice really between Ken and David. I mean, Ken would not have stayed in the band if David had stayed. There was animosity between them. They just didn't get on very well. But actually, in the end, it was a very difficult. It was a dilemma in the sense that if you got rid of Ken, or if Ken left the band, we wouldn't have got rid of him. If Ken had left the band, we'd have had no material, and if David had left the band, we'd have no one to sing the songs. We made a decision that wasn't a good one.
Things were falling apart. Record sales were dropping off. Blah blah blah. We decided it was all Jerry Bron's fault, which of course it wasn't. I mean, he may have had something to do with it, but it wasn't his fault. So he became the lamb for the slaughter. So, Jerry, you're fired. You're not going to produce this record. We're going to produce it ourselves, which meant Joe Bloggs was going to produce it because I had co-produced with Jerry and so on.
High and Mighty was produced by Uriah Heep. Sorry to laugh. They have no idea how to make records at all. It wasn't a very good record. They had one of the best engineers that we'd ever fostered in my studio, your Roundhouse recording studio, Ashley Howe. So Ashley was a terrific engineer, but it wasn't a good record.
Take me out of the darkness into the light. I've no friends to stand by me here in the night.
Okay, so it's time to make a record. Who's got any songs then? I guess, Ken's got some songs. So I bring in a pile of songs. I'm producing the record. Nobody else seems to give a shit. I mean, they're all in the pub and everything else. I went, okay, no problem. So it's almost like a solo album with the band. Well, okay, I can sit here and laugh about it. A High and Mighty is not a typical classic Heep album, and that's why I like it.
The fans must have scratched their heads in disbelief at the pure tweeness of Woman of the World and I Can't Stop Singing. You know, for me, they have no place on a Heep album.
If you hear the song I Can't Stop Singing, you think, my God, why did they put that on? So it's an album with many different styles and qualities.
We actually did a launch party at, you know, that at the top of a Swiss mountain, there's some famous cafe, I can't remember the name of it now, and that was a disaster. David drank, but what David didn't remember was that if you drink and you're 7,000 feet up, it has even more effect, the alcohol, and he was pissed out of his skull, and it was another disaster. It wasn't good.
I think, well, I've always known Uriah Heep's been a world a world-class band on a world stage. You know, I've always felt that, you know, and that's been my drive all along, you know.
In the days with David Byron in the band, there really was no finer group than Uriah Heep.
Are they given enough recognition as a band for the influence they had? Well, certainly not by the press. They were scathing pretty much all the way through the early career.
One of the main reasons was that Jerry Brunn promoted the band in England heavily. So heavily that the musical press got a little bit cynical about it. So they started bashing the band from the first album on.
We were part of that heavy metal, hard rock, pop rock thing that came out of England at the end of the 60s into the early 70s. We took the rebelliousness of The Who, we tried to refine it a little musically, but we took the energy, along with Deep Purple and Sabbath and Zeppelin and bands like that, we took it all over the world, and everywhere I go in the world now, I meet people that were influenced by it.
I mean, this is a band that has influenced probably every rock band from 1973 onwards, if they're a hard rock band in some way or another. You know, and you've got major bands like Iron Maiden and Queen, which have cited them as a prime influence, and I don't think they were ever given the credit they were due.
They were a team band. None of them were terrific musicians, but together they were a very, very powerful unit.
Right now, on Top of the Pops, it's time to bring you Uriah Heep.
Was John Lawton a good replacement for David Byron? The guy had a monumental task on his hand with big shoes to fill.
I sat before the wise man in the autumn of my youth.
As a replacement, no, I don't think so. As a singer for Uriah Heep, yes, I think he was, at the time, certainly the best option the band had.
If you need to find the truth.
What John did have was a great singing voice.
I mean, he was a good singer, isn't he? You know.
So I came right out and asked him the meaning of life. And as he smiled, I saw a twinkle in his eye. He said, with all his years, there's still so much he has to learn. And once again, I saw that it was so.
Of course, John would never be able to match David Byron for flamboyance or showmanship, but then again, nobody could really. He was unique.
Now, there are two ways bands can go when they're looking to replace a great frontman. They can look for a counterfeit, if you want, a facsimile, someone who's similar in style and presentation, or they can go a completely different route. Heep, quite sensibly, decided to go for someone very different.
It was so different from David Byron. David Byron was a traditional kind of frontman, as Rod Stewart and Mick Jagger, the way he moved on stage and played with the crowd. And there was a man with feathers in his ear and eyeshadow and a complete different voice. And he had a leather suit on. So that was, well, at first it was difficult to see him as the brilliant new singer of Uriah Heep, really.
John Lawton gradually endeared himself to the fans, and he could handle all the old stuff easily. Significantly, Heep were becoming less heavy musically as well, so maybe this contributed to some of the discontent of some of the fans. But I thought he was a great frontman. I thought he was an excellent replacement.
But I'm looking for an easy way to love.
And I'd only been in the band a week, so I really didn't have much of a say who was going to be in the band, and I didn't really think I should say anything anyway. You know, I mean, Hensley was ruling the roost at the time, or trying to at the time. You know, so it was more down to him and the other.
Whereas David was a pop rock singer, as I've said before, which suited the band's reputed style and certainly suited the songs I wrote. John was more of a blues rock singer.
I grew up in the northeast, And the music that I was listening to at that time, there was a lot, very much blues based. John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, you name it, I listened to it. And I grew up with that, and I think that was music, and I still feel these days that that's where my roots are.
In a live situation, it was great because John was a good performer and his voice was very powerful. But again, you're talking about somebody who's essentially irreplaceable. So I would prefer to look at John not as David's replacement, but just as another singer for Uriah Heep, and I think that he did a very, very good job.
John Lawton was another mistake. He had a great voice, but he put on that voice. It wasn't a natural voice. He looked bad. I mean, he was bald, or balding, and he was a bad replacement. He was a nice guy, and he wasn't a showman. So he failed on almost every count.
He was a great screamer, as he showed on tracks like Free and Easy and Sympathy. Absolutely an unbelievable singer.
Realistically, so many songs belong to David Byron, from the likes of Easy Livin' to July Morning to Gypsy. There was no way that John Lawton, even though he was a better singer, could really do justice in the way that Byron did. They were David Byron songs.
I had the pleasure of seeing Heep at Reading in 1977 when they topped the bill, and Lawton was fantastic. His enthusiasm for singing the old Byron songs was absolutely spot on. He was keen to give the fans exactly what they wanted. There were some fans who were ungracious and refused to accept him under any circumstances.
When you asked me in 2004 if John did justice to Uriah Heep classic songs, I would say yes, because he sang them, he's still singing, but he was then singing them in his own way. When you have asked me that in 1977, I would have said no, because I would like to hear David Byron singing the classic songs.
I think Lawton brought a vibrance to the Byron era songs. I mean, no one was ever going to replace David Byron, that was very, very clear. But he had his own look, he had his own setup, and visually some would argue he wasn't as good as David Byron. Some obviously would argue that he was better in whatever vein.
We went to a huge amount of trouble to get him in the band, but looking back on it, I'm amazed that we bothered, really.
He was good. He could, especially in Germany, you could talk to him in German. But he was great, you know. He was a good singer. The only thing that was a bit weird was all that Blue Island makeup he used to put on. You remember that?
I've loved you as much as any man can, but not enough to make you mine.
Apart from losing David Byron, Heep also had to find a replacement for John Wetton, who quit pretty much at the same time. And they decided to go for Trevor Bolder.
The reason why I joined it, I suppose, is because of Woody Woodmansey, actually. He was at Bronze Records one day and somebody happened to say, oh, Heep were looking for a bass player. And he said, I know somebody who might be interested. So he rang me up and said, Heep looking for a bass player, ring this guy up, and he gave me this number, and it was Ken Hensley, so I rang Ken at home. And he said, oh yeah, we're auditioning on, it was a Sunday, Lane, July Morning, Easy Living, and something else, be there by 4, I think it was. So I went down and we played July Morning, and we played Easy Living, and we messed about for a little bit, and me and Mick had the same birthday and were the same height, so I got the job. I got nothing to do with the playing.
Trevor Bolder is really a very talented bass player, and when he joined Uriah Heep, we were very proud because he played with David Bowie on Aladdin Insane and Hunky Dory and The Spiders from Mars. So yeah, we were very proud that he was joining Uriah Heep. He was a completely different bass player from John Wetton or Gary Thain.
What Trevor Boulder brought to Uriah Heep was something very safe and sturdy. The thing with Boulder is you can lean back against his bass lines and know you're not going to fall over. He's not the spectacular player that John Wetton is, and he certainly wasn't the supple master that Gary Thain was, but he was much steadier, and he gave the band a great grounding.
He is the closest thing for me to the style of Gary Thain, the long melodic lines, the steady plodding bass lines. Absolutely fantastic.
Trevor has his own style. I think he's a really good player, very smooth and fluid player. His playing moves a lot, and I think he's also very much more versatile perhaps than John Wetton was. Trevor can play in many different styles and be comfortable in all of them.
Firefly put Uriah Heep very much back on track after a couple of hit and misses and misfires as well. They needed to come back strongly with an album that showcased what John Lawton was about and took Uriah Heep forward. And Firefly was definitely that album.
It had a good rock element, the harmonic vocals were in there in all the right places, and you had the consistency of playing, added, I think, very much by Trevor Boulder's playing.
I mean, the songs were really, really good. Yeah, it was a good album. There's still some really classic songs on there, Heap songs on there, I think, you know.
Ken Hensley brought some great compositions to that album, and the performances were universally of a very high standard. It was an excellent record.
Don't take me for granted, 'cause you know I'm a lot just like you. And I'm too handsome till you want me to. Who needs me now? You find somehow, you find one. Who needs me now? You find another, no better. You can't argue with me, no one needs you. You did not know how.
It was a complete different album. Jerry Brown was back in as a producer.
Mr. Non-producer.
Or maybe on the producing side, they could have done a better job.
He just sat there and read aircraft magazines and go, yes, that's a good take. No, do it again. Did he know? Yeah. So Jerry was, I don't know, he wasn't a musician.
There's not a memorable song on it. A sign of great failure, produced by me, I'm afraid, but, you know, it just wasn't good enough. I mean, at that point, we're losing everything. You know, we've got John Lawton as the lead singer, not as good as David Byron by any means at all. I don't know, it just didn't work.
Songs like The Hanging Tree, Firefly itself, are very melodic and very simple. As Hensley always said, that Uriah Heep should play simple, melodic songs, and they were back in again.
Firefly, it was an okay album. I definitely missed David by that time. I think some of the songs I wrote for Firefly would have been much better had David sung them. Nevertheless, I think we did with the best we could with what we had, and to be honest, I was beginning to really seriously lose interest in the whole project at that time.
The sound is generally lighter than previous Heep albums, but Heep were to naturally evolve. Some lovely songs on there. The title track, Firefly, is beautiful with some sensitive sections and some heavy sections and great harmonies.
It had The Hanging Tree, it had Wise Man, two very strong songs, and above all, it had a great anthem in Sympathy. So at last, Heep were making good records again.
Sympathy just doesn't mean that much to me. Compassion's not the fashion in my mind. And if you're looking for a shoulder to cry on, don't turn your head my way, 'cause I'd rather have my music any day. You and I are masters of our destiny. We look for consolation all the time, until we find out things are not what they were meant to be. Oh no, and if it doesn't suit our mood, we'll call it crime.
Sympathy was one of the highlights of Firefly for me, but then I love the guitar playing in that song.
One of the things that really stands out with it is almost the Wishbone Ash-esque guitar trade-off between Ken Hensley, who picked up the guitar rather than the keyboard on this one, and Mick Box.
And it's acid, it's rock, it's not sweet like Brian May's sound. Some great vocals, proving once again that John Lawton could scream with the best of them.
It's a fantastic song that really rolls along, and you expect it at any point to take off, and it never does. And that's the beauty. It is slightly understated, and that really accentuates how good the song is.
It's a shuffle in D minor, and I have to make mention of the wonderful drumming on this. There are very few drummers that can play that 12/8 shuffle as can Lee with the intricate bass drum work. And it's a noteworthy performance from Lee. All in all, a great track.
Sympathy was more of a throwback to the earlier days of Uriah Heep. Sympathy had a lot of the powerful ingredients that songs like Stealing and so on had. So I don't know if it's the highlight for me. I tend to go more for pure musical highlights, but I think as a song it was a bit more like Uriah Heep.
The highlight of Firefly, in my view, was the Firefly, the song itself. Some say it's Sympathy, but I don't think so. Sympathy was a hit song in a few European countries. It was in Holland, for instance. It's a very catchy song, but Firefly is back to the mystical side of Uriah Heep with all the hallmarks in there.
I said before the wise man in the autumn of my youth, and I told him all the things I had to know.
A Wise Man has always been one of my favourites. Ken Hensley wrote this song, and it just has a real nice feel to it. And it was one of the first songs I ever sang with Heep anyway.
Is Wise Man a great song compared to Every Breath I Take, or You Take, or House of the Rising Sun? I don't know, it's not really for me to say.
A lot of Heep fans like Wise Man. It's not a personal favourite of mine. I think it's a good song, but there were better songs on the album.
Yeah, I liked it. It was all right, you know. It's poppy Heep song, really, Wise Man. But I mean, a lot of people like it. A lot of Heep fans like it.
Keep on living, loving, waiting your time is the only way to ease your concern.
After years of trying, in many respects with stronger material like Easy Living and Stealing, Uriah Heep finally had a chart hit in the UK, and it was really bizarre to see my band, if you like, on Top of the Pops.
I don't know how we got on. I don't know who grabbed who to get us on.
When we came to do it on Top of the Pops, it was actually, the singing was live, but we were using the original backing track. I hope the BBC's not going to see this. Yeah.
To be honest, I think we were para before we did the show, because we'd been there from 11 o'clock in the morning. You take a band and stick it in a place from 11 in the morning, and you're not really shooting it till late at night, and there's a bar. Yeah. Fat chance of us being sober when they shoot it properly.
I had been using the image of the earrings and the makeup around the eyes, looking like something out of Hell's Kitchen. I wasn't quite sure whether we could go on Top of the Pops with me looking like that and singing a song like Wise Man or not. But in the end, we decided that I should carry on that image onto Top of the Pops, and we did it with Dave Lee Travis, and I sang it live, and it turned out really well. I have never seen it since. I would really like to see the original of that. That would be very interesting.
You find it is a shooting for the moon. Yeah, wise man, which way shall I run? There's so many roads, so many ways to turn.
The song works very, very well indeed. It's not exactly a classic heavy rock tune by any stretch, but it's a great, great song with great dynamics.
It allowed Lawton to be what he is, a great singer. Lawton brought a certain soulful aspect, a certain gospel aspect to the vocals in Uriah Heep and also to the music, and this really came out with Wise Man because it's that sort of song. You can't imagine David Byron singing something like that.
I'm gonna ride, yeah, keep on riding, woo, ride, keep on riding, keep on riding, yeah, ride, keep on riding, ride, 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 keep on riding.
Innocent Victim was the band's second album of 1977, and it was their 11th album, for Christ's sake, which is, some would say, overkill, and certainly you can't criticise them for laziness.
Innocent Victim is actually a rather good album. In many respects, it's better than what had gone before, because it does have the likes of the title track, Free and Easy, and of course Free Me, which is an all-time Uriah Heep classic. Overall, though, somehow it didn't hang together as well as Firefly.
To some fans, the album was a disappointment because it had got a little bit softer in some areas. But if you listen to the album today, and I've remastered this very recently, even mixing extra tracks which were recorded at the same time but not included on the album, it has a vibrance that I think has stood the test of time.
And I know you say I'm drifting on a dream. You better watch your step, boy. You know it may not be what it seems.
It's got a country feel about it, hasn't it? You know, a country, it veers off the rock and has this Kenny Hensley's gone eagerly sort of feel about it, doesn't it? You know, I think that maybe a lot of people liked that, you know, especially with Free Me, the single, and when they bought the album. I mean, that album just took off.
In sales terms, it became one of the best-selling albums ever. Behind me here, you've got one of the gold discs that the band were awarded in Australia for sales of that album, and the same pattern was being repeated all over the world. So commercially it worked very well, even if musically it wasn't their strongest work.
The album featured songs by Jack Williams, who was a colleague of Ken Hensley's, signed to his Humble Tunes company. Songs like Keep On Riding, the opening track, The Dance and Choices, which were a little un-Heep-like, but fair songs on their own. It was generally untypical Heep, with the exception of Free and Easy, which by any standards is one of the better Heep songs. This is absolutely great.
When you're lonely, and your friends are not around, or you make your big decision, put your feet back on the ground. Oh yeah. Oh, when you're down, no one wants you.
Free and Easy does definitely have the stamp of Demons and Wizards Magician's Birthday era Uriah Heep in the way it's presented, in the way it's performed, and also in the way Don Lawton sings it. And he does a very good job. It's got that acoustic, heavy interrelationship, it's got the melody, and it's very much built in the same way that Heep had done so often in the earlier part of their career with David Byron.
Free and Easy was definitely back to the old Heep sound. Lawton and Box obviously willing to inject a bit of fire back into the band. It's another shuffle in D, and it was tailor-made for John Lawton's vocal. Obviously he co-wrote the song. It's absolutely fantastic, some fine drumming, and the high spot for me is that wonderful guitar duel between Ken Hensley's slide and Mick Box, which we witnessed again at the first Magician's Birthday Party gig. Absolutely magic, and this to me is what they should have been doing around about that time.
Free and Easy was fantastic. That was Mick Box doing what he does best. He went wild on his guitar, and it's a classic, 2.5 minute frenzy of a number. Brilliant stuff.
That's good, yeah. I mean, I enjoy that. Anything that rocks, that's got some real good feel about it, yeah. I enjoy it.
I don't think it really stands to the standards of Uriah Heep, because there is not much vocal harmony. There is no really mystic, fairy tale kind of lyrics there. It's just a guitar fight, really, but we liked it.
Yeah, it's got those elements. Free and Easy is a song which has got things which people consider to be familiar parts of the Uriah Heep formula, as it were. Not my favourite song, but good energy.
As far as I can tell, you knew so well, I was always at the end of the line.
I think the high of Innocent Victim was Free Me, without a question. Interesting story, really, because we had practically finished the album. Nobody felt terribly strongly about it, but it was a decent album. And then I wrote Free Me at home, recorded it in my studio, and on virtually the last day of recording Innocent Victim, I brought it into the studio. Jerry played it. Everybody fell in love with it.
The track, before we put the voices on, sounded so terrific that I went upstairs, because we had the studio downstairs and the offices upstairs, to look up the contract to see what the unrecouped advance was, because I was so convinced it was going to be an enormous success and I was going to have to find the money to pay the band. It was never that big a hit, but it sounded fantastic in the studio. So in a way we'd almost got back to something that we had lost. So it was a very, very good track.
And it became the focal track, the focus track of the album eventually, and a very huge successful single in many countries.
Why won't you free me? Free me from your spell.
It fitted John Lawton perfectly, allowed him to really open up that tremendous range. And of course it became a surprising hit for them, especially in countries such as South Africa, because of the sentiments of the song, and also the fact that the title stood out, and it really became almost an anti-apartheid anthem, which must have surprised Uriah Heep greatly.
Free Me was very much an unexpected hit. Obviously there was an attempt there to capture the same atmosphere as Lady in Black, and it certainly treads a very similar vein.
I think Jerry Bron had been saying, okay, you've got to come up with another Lady in Black. But we just had Lady in Black as a massive hit single in Germany. So you've got to have another hit after it. So Free Me was geared towards filling that gap, and the next hit single. I mean, Lady in Black, when it took off for the second time in Germany, was one of the biggest singles ever in Germany. So, I mean, you've got to come up with something else. So I think Ken thought Lady in Black, and he came up with Free Me.
Why won't you free me? Come on and free me. Free me from your spell.
Free Me had the ingredients of a hit single, and it ultimately went on to become a hit single. So I don't know whether it was unexpected or not, but it worked. It worked very, very well.
It's a very commercial song, and it's a very happy song, and it's a song that's easy for people to sing the hook, and most hits are about hooks anyway, so Free Me was huge here in Spain. It was huge here in Spain, so a surprise, yes, but looking back, not totally unexpected.
It was great. I mean, it was a good pop tune. I think the band were quite proud of it. The 12-string guitar is a nice touch in there, but certainly John Lawton voiced his dissatisfaction with it. He said it just wasn't what Heep were about. But the one good thing, of course, is that it broadened the audiences. What was perhaps not such a good thing was that it brought in a new audience that weren't aware of Heep's heavy rock background, and I think some of them were a little bit shocked when they maybe bought Free Me as a single, and then went to see the band live and were surprised at how much heavier it was on stage.
Uriah Heep certainly went in another direction from where they came from. And I don't think they lost direction, they just choose to do another way of making music.
Ken was trying to write poppy hit singles. Okay, we might have had one massive big album, but in some respects you tend to lose your hardcore fans, that are the rock fans, that buy all your albums. And I think it wasn't good to go completely in that direction that Ken wanted it to go.
I think Heep had lost direction at this time. It was really the first time we see an outside songwriter being used to augment Ken Hensley's writing. Ken was clearly feeling at the limits of his ability to continue to deliver albums on this treadmill, and bringing in a co-writer was an attempt to try and keep things fresh.
I failed to see the necessity of bringing in outside writers, talented as Jack Williams was. I think there may have been resentment that outside writers were being brought in. John Lawton has since voiced his dissatisfaction with doing poppier stuff like Free Me, which, although it was a huge hit, he certainly didn't feel comfortable with.
I hate to criticise him. I think a lot of this is down to the production. Jerry Bron was locked into a cycle. He was very much part of Uriah Heep's entourage. He needed someone from the outside to come in and really dust down the band and say, listen, this guy has got a tremendous range. He can give you something extra. Let him do it. Let's write to his strengths, rather than writing to the strengths of the band as of yore and trying to fit him in.
I think we lost direction. Uriah Heep lost direction a long time before songs like Free and Easy. I think that we started to lose direction after Gary died, and I think we continued to go progressively downhill from there. I had numerous conversations with Jerry about my desire to leave the band and do something new. I was always convinced to stay. Let's do another record, let's do one more tour and so on, and I did that. But honestly, I felt the band was more like a tribute band by that time.
I think it's hugely sad, the lack of input songwriting-wise from Mick Box in these last couple of albums. I think his fire and the essence of his songs was vital to counterbalance what Ken was doing. And I think the direction was a little bit haywire at this time.
I don't think they had lost direction with Innocent Victim. I think they were trying to focus their direction even more so, and they were certainly trying to garner more sales. Now, whether that was through record company pressure or the fact that Ken and the other members of the band were writing songs that were actually going to do very, very well is another matter. No, I think they were trying to find or focus a direction even further on than Firefly.
Fallen Angel took Uriah Heep even further down the pop track. It was a very poppy album from the opener onwards.
Fallen Angel followed very much in the pattern of what had gone before with Firefly and An Innocent Victim. It wasn't a great album. It had its great moments. Come Back to Me and Fallen Angel itself were two very, very good tracks. But in reality, at this point, the band really were treading water.
Fallen Angel surprised me because by then Bronze was with Chrysalis. And I remember vividly taking it to Chrysalis, and they had one of these big meetings where 20 people turn up and you play the record to them. And they actually clapped after some tracks, so they must have liked something there. But I didn't think it was that good.
I put Fallen Angel and Firefly into the same general category of albums that weren't really approached with real solid conviction, at least on my part. Yes, I produced the songs, and yes, I thought Fallen Angel was a decent song. But speaking for myself, no, I didn't approach that album with any real conviction in terms of saying this is going to be a great record. It's going to be a record, and that's it. If it's great, that would be by pure luck.
It was the 12th studio album, and it was the last one to feature John Lawton, and incidentally Lee Kerslake for a while, who had also had enough and departed. It had its moments. I think Mick's guitar work on What Do You Say was quite interesting, and they'd begun to delve into the production techniques that were becoming increasingly available to them.
At the time, I remember being hugely disappointed, but in retrospect, it's one of these albums that I enjoy enormously today.
I don't think Fallen Angel was an improvement on Innocent Victim, but I also don't think it was a big disappointment either. It was in a similar vein, albeit they had cut the song lengths down in some cases. There are some great numbers on Fallen Angel.
Fallen Angel did have, of course, Come Back to Me, which is again one of the career highlights of Uriah Heep, and was a well-deserved hit single on the continent.
Alone again, I feel so alone again. With this emptiness, I just can't hide.
Lee Kerslake's Come Back to Me, I think, is a Heep classic.
Come Back to Me was the third of the great classics that John Lawton recorded. We had Sympathy, we had Free Me, this was the third one.
Many Heapsters like this song very much.
I've loved it, of course I loved it. I mean, it's very important to me. It's a loss of my family, my little boy and my wife in the past.
Come Back to Me is a real underrated classic. It's an excellent composition, brilliantly sung, brilliantly arranged. It's a wonderful song.
It's a fantastic ballad, and it really should have been acclaimed and hailed as a classic long since, but never really did. Maybe because it was following in the footsteps of Free Me, which had been such a big hit, it would seem almost as a rewrite. It isn't a rewrite. And if you listen to the differences in structure between the two songs, it becomes very obvious that Uriah Heep didn't follow the template of Free Me for Come Back to Me. It stands out in its own right.
It's in E flat, which is an unusual key for Uriah Heep. They'd always tended to stick with the strident, open, suitable for guitar keys, but E flat was just right for John Lawton's vocal, and I think he delivered one of the best vocals that he could possibly have done.
It's a nice song. I don't think it's underrated. I think, again, it's a bit of a pastiche of other songs of a similar kind. It's not a great song. It's a nice song. I wouldn't put it any higher than that.
It's got great emotional values in there, and but it's a ballad, and I'm not sure if many Heep fans like ballads that much, but for that era, for the Lawton era, it was a classic.
The power of love can bring such pain. I still love you. I just love you. Alone again.
Come Back to Me is a good song. Personally, I wouldn't call it a classic. I think some of the songs on Fallen Angel, like the title track itself, Fallen Angel, were far better than Come Back to Me. But I can see why the fans liked it.
I think Come Back to Me is a very good song. I think there are many good pop elements about it. I think it's a very, very good song. Whether it's underrated or not, I don't know. It's not a song I get asked to play very often in fan situations or at concerts or wherever. I don't see that it gets much radio play, so maybe it was a good song in the right place on the right album, but I don't think it was powerful enough overall to become a classic or anything like that.
It's a good song, there's no doubt about it. It's a really good song, but it's not a July Morning, is it? You know, and it's not an Easy Living, and it's not a Look at Yourself or a Bird of Prey or Sunrise. Those sort of songs. It's not got that element in it. I mean, we still play those songs today. Why do we play those songs today? Because everybody likes them.
Make up your mind, 'cause you're running out of time. You know it's your game, and the winner takes all. It's time for you to realize there's gonna be no compromise. It's gotta be love, nothing at all. Gotta be love for nothing.
Love or Nothing from the Fallen Angel album is a very decent, very healthy ballad. Again, it showcased what John Lawton was so good at, which is opening up a song and really enriching it with that wonderful tone that he had.
Love or Nothing in C minor with a strong acoustic feel. I actually like the sort of Crosby, Stills and Nash vibe to the song, although it's definitely somewhat on the poppy side for some of the fans.
Not for me. Not for me. I liked it. I thought it was a good song, and it was a pop song. There's no question it was a pop song. But does that invalidate the song? No, I don't think so. Not in my opinion. If you want to look at every song that Uriah Heep did from a purely formulaic standpoint, if you want to compare every song with Easy Living or Stealing, then yeah, you could say it's too much of a pop song. But too much of a pop song compared to what?
And for some reason, I love that song myself because it's catchy, and it always stayed in my head, really. Although there is a lot of la 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 on that song, I have to admit.
It's gotta be love or nothing at all.
Well, Love or Nothing was a pop song. I don't think it was too much of a pop song. I just think there were too many pop songs on Fallen Angel.
I think that if the rest of the album had have featured a lot more rock stuff, the fans would have been probably more liable to have accepted this song as an excursion into a lighter moment. But I actually really like this, although it certainly is poppy.
It stood the test of time rather well over the years. A lot of what Heep has done, especially at that point, now stands as nostalgia, antiquated and slightly dated. Love or Nothing could actually be re-recorded today and it would stand up rather well.
For me, I thought it worked as a song, but evidently other people didn't think that because they never threw very much energy behind it. One song that I would pick as a natural single. I thought it was a very radio-friendly song, but purely my opinion.
Without a doubt, on Fallen Angel, the band had strayed too far away from its identity as a hard rock, heavy band. It had become too much immersed in the acoustic pop side of the band, which was always there, this lighter, melodic frame of mind, but it took over too much on Fallen Angel.
I think it progressed in a way that was fairly natural. There was never an attempt to steer it in any direction, so that was fine. I think they fell to pieces, and as things disintegrate, it goes in a direction. But I don't think they ever lost their original drive. It just the drive wasn't as strong as it had been at the beginning.
Uriah Heep was struggling to find a way forward that allowed them to hold on to their roots, but also to bring something new onto the horizon. And it was a great struggle for them. And part of the reason was there was so much entrenchment within the band. They needed to open up, needed to be far greater and wider in their vision. And they were locking themselves down.
I just think the band had completely lost interest in the band. I think we'd gathered a lot of interest in the money and all the things around the band, and I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else. The problem with me was that my losing interest was a little bit more radical than like Lee losing interest, because I wrote all the songs for the band, and so songs were our strength and we lost that strength, and I take some responsibility for that.
I think Ken had got fed up with the fact that he was being attacked for writing all the songs. The band were on his back. They wanted to write songs. They wanted to make money out of writing songs. They didn't deserve to.
Ken really sort of tried to rule the roost in every area, and he was in league with Jerry. John Lawton was writing some songs. I mean, I got a couple of bits in there on songs. So John was writing with, and Mick was writing with John, and Lee was it. But the majority of the stuff was coming out of Ken. Really, it should have been more rock. It should have been more experimental. And all Ken was trying to do in some respects was write another Lady in Black, Free Me, or whatever. And if he wrote enough songs like that, maybe one of them would be a massive hit and he'd earn more money out of it, I suppose.
You know you always said I was the man. I'll pick up the pieces, let's do it now. Let's say our last farewell. Tomorrow may be too late as far as I can tell.
You've got to understand that definitely after Free Me, they were under great pressure to produce ever more commercial singles. And they were seduced by the possibility that America may open up big for them once again.
And it wasn't so much that they weren't doing the hard rock. What they weren't doing were the epic numbers. And I think it was the epic numbers in many ways that made Uriah Heep. You have a look at any big selling album, there are 1 or 2 tracks that had some extended pieces. And certainly pieces that when they played them live, they took this 5 or 6, 7 minute piece and stretched it out sometimes to double that length. And it worked extremely well in a live environment. I don't really think Fallen Angel had anything they could do that with.
John Lawton as a singer had one great quality above everything else: sincerity. When he sang a song, you really believed that what he was singing were lyrics he meant, he felt passionate about, and came direct from his soul. And soul is the key and operative word here, because John Lawton wasn't just a great rock singer, he had a soulful element to it and a gospel element to it. He was an inspired singer as well.
John is a superb singer technically, and has one of those rare voices which, alongside David Coverdale and Paul Rodgers, is one of the great British rock voices.
Can't fault him. He can do it all, you know. He can do anything you want. If you want him to sing in a certain way, I'm sure he can just do it. You know, he's got the ability, he's got the knowledge, he's practiced his craft all these years, and he can just go in there and do it.
Well, he's just one of the best rock vocalists ever, still is today. And I think it's a real shame that he's not playing in a band like Uriah Heep. I mean, here is a guy who can hit any note at any time of the day, and you will never hear the guy sing a bum note.
Sympathy just doesn't mean that much to me. Compassion is not the fashion in my mind. And if you're looking for a shoulder to cry on, well, turn your head my way, 'cause I'd rather have my music any
I think that his stage singing was maybe better than David's was, because he always had a little bit trouble by singing on stage, and John was, well, a very good singer.
He had an incredibly powerful and fat voice. He was a great ad-libber. If you listen to the stuff that he did on Sympathy and Free and Easy, he had the ability to do very soulful ad-libs.
When we went down to South Africa, and he sang with us down in South Africa when Benny lost his voice, and we got out there and we did the first gig. It was like, and he started doing his soul stuff, you know, at the end of songs. Like, it was like, Jesus Christ, what voice, you know. A really, really great voice he's got, and powerful. God, you have to turn him down in the monitors, you know, because he's louder, way louder than you. I don't know how he does it, to be honest. I mean, because lately when he's sung with us, and you still don't think like, well, he's in his 50s now, surely someone's got to start giving a bit. He's got to start dropping keys or something, you know, the voices. Not with John. He's still up there, still doing it.
I'd have to say there were many good things about our time together with John. I think John brought some different things to the band. His studio work was phenomenal. I mean, his studio work was amazing. The notes that he could reach, the ideas he brought to the melodies, his improvisational skills were fantastic. Not something that we were in any way used to. On stage live, he never came to the stage weak. His voice was always strong, his presence was powerful.
for some reason, Ken took offence to something, and they finished up arguing, the pair of them, and the next thing, Ken wanted him off.
Unfortunately for me, I always compared him to David, and that's a fatal thing to do. I should never have done that. You make those wrong comparisons, or you put people into the wrong category as a replacement. Does Phil Lanzin replace me? No. Is Phil Lanzin a good keyboard player? Yes. But you ask any fan, and any real fan, and Uriah Heep for them was David Byron, Mick Box, Lee Kerslake, Gary Thain and me.
But I did hear rumours later on Ken did want rid of everybody, so I mean, he would have replaced the whole band so he could take control of it, you know. But he failed in that one.
I mean, there has to be a reason why Led Zeppelin chose not to replace John Bonham. And look at the failed attempts that the Who made to replace Keith Moon. I mean, you establish a combined identity, and one element is broken away from that permanently. That's going to be an awful tough decision to make.
So don't try to compare it, 'cause I just want to share it with some people I like to call friends. There ain't nothing bad and no need to feel sad, and there's certainly no need to make amends.
There was a fourth album recorded, which has been infamously titled 5 Miles. It's not, you know, a from the vault selection. This was the fourth album that John Lawton recorded with Uriah Heep. Ken Hensley was in there, of course, and so was Lee Kerslake. You know, that is a complete album produced by Jimmy Miller. Brilliant singing on it. It's absolutely stunning.
We'd done an album that we scrapped. It never got released. John had written some songs on it, and Ken had written some songs, and it had even gone even further into the poppy country, and it wasn't Heep at all. You know, I mean, even Jerry Brum noticed it, and that was amazing. And we were all. I remember me and Mick and Lee. I think we were worried about it because we weren't getting any control over it, and it just sounded really not good. You know, it wasn't. The songwriting wasn't good. Ken had lost it in that area, I think, and nobody was coming up with the goods. Let's put it that way on this album.
In terms of what Uriah Heep produced and recorded, the John Lawton era can only be really credited as a partial success. They never made the great album they were capable of. If you took tracks from each of the 3 records that John Lawton recorded with them, Firefly, Innocent Victim and Fallen Angel, you could make a great record. But each one of them has its downsides. It never really gelled and took off. And it's not John Lawton's fault. He offered Heep a way forward that they didn't quite grasp. And the reason I'm convinced is because there were 1 or 2 members of the band so locked into the past they couldn't see into the future, and the changes need to be made.
I think the problems they had was there were personality clashes between various members of the band, and I think John Lawton, fairly or unfairly, copped a lot of that.
For the die-hard Uriah Heep fan who was brought up with Salisbury, with Demons and Wizards, with Look at Yourself, I think the Lawton era was kind of a disappointment because they didn't bring the music the real Uriah Heep fan loved.
I don't think he should be given any blame whatsoever for the lightening of the Heep sound. I think he was more than willing to keep it up there and heavy. But I think there was some rewarding stuff there. And also a couple of the things that he had written and co-written contributed very much to the band's success. I think he was a great front man.
I think the Lawton area was a success. I mean, it obviously proved it with sales. It kept the band going in a very, very difficult time for hard rock. You know, you had the advent of punk. You had a band that was working and living primarily in the UK, where punk had hit hardest. So I think they were very, very lucky and also very clever and hard-working to pull it off.
This time, so there'll be no turning back once I know that you'll be by my side.
When John Lawton left the band, they brought in John Sloman, who was a good singer in his own right, not as good as John Lawton, and certainly didn't have the personality of David Byron. And as a result, they ended up with an album that's possibly one of the worst of their career.
Conquest is a hugely controversial album in terms of Uriah Heep history, and it's very much debated even to this day. For me personally, it's one of my all-time favourite albums, and it's one of the few albums I think consistently works on every single track. But I understand why there are a large number of Uriah Heep fans who really detest that record.
At the time, I didn't think that Conquest was a good album, because you didn't hear Uriah Heep that much. You didn't hear the hallmarks of Uriah Heep in the songs. Many years later, I learned to appreciate this album as quite a good album. There are very strong songs on there, and I think it's the highlight album for Trevor Bolder. Very good bass playing there.
Trevor was actually really coming into his own by now. His songs were starting to become more important. But Sloman was not greeted warmly by the fans.
Was Conquest a good album? Deathly silence there, isn't there? Not really, no.
When you look at Conquest, you look at the personnel, you look at the songs, and you realise that none of this is as good as it used to be. John Sloman is doing all the vocals, backing vocals, piano, you see, he was a very good all-round musician. But he's not a David Byron, and he wasn't really even a John Lawton. The songs, you look at the songs, Boulder Box Hensley, Boulder again. I mean, Trevor Bolder is not a songwriter in my book.
They wrote a lot of material that was inappropriate that John Sloman could not sing. The likes of No Return and Carry On, and even Out on the Streets, which is a little bit more progressive. They didn't fit John Sloman. So they were writing for John Lawton, ironically, at the time he'd left, with a man who really wasn't comfortable with where they were going.
Like all of the Heep albums, it did have its moments. Carry On with the sequenced synthesizer was very, very interesting. But all in all, I think both the fans and certainly I felt that it was time for them to take a sabbatical and take a step back and reevaluate what they were about.
My friends are telling me I'm chasing rainbows, I'm searching for the gold beneath the sea. But rainbows only shine when it's been raining, and gold will never keep you company. So now,
John Sloman came in after Lawton, and he was a completely different singer. He looked much more like, Robert Plant. Lawton looked like, Lawton. And I think that the Heep management, and then I'm talking about Ken Hensley and Jerry Braun, wanted to have a frontman like David Byron again, a good-looking young singer. And that's why they choose to get John Sloman in the band.
I think you'd have to say that John Sloman was not a good addition to Uriah Heep. He had aspirations in the Stevie Wonder mould which just didn't fit with the band at all. Obviously the band needed freshening up, but he was certainly not the man to freshen it up.
John Sloman was the worst move vocally Heep ever made. He's easily the worst of the bunch. And it's not, again, I have to say, not because he's a bad singer. He is a good singer, but he was never really brought properly into the Uriah Heep fold. They never wrote for what he was comfortable with. They wrote too many rockers that John Sloman couldn't sing. He was better at the slower stuff.
Was Sloman a good addition to Uriah Heep? I think you should ask Ken Hensley that.
No, I think it was completely a mistake, but I was in a minority of one in that decision. The decision was made democratically between John Sloman and Pete Golby. I wanted Pete Golby, the other guys wanted John Sloman. They got John Sloman, I left and they hired Pete Golby. Go figure.
Ken Hensley was, on the other hand, not very happy with Sloman because he sang the songs so different from their original state.
You take a song like Feelings, for example. A song like Feelings is so simple, and John Sloman just tried to turn it into a Gino Vanelli song. I mean, you know, these feelings, empty feeling, praying, hoping, needing, just when I wanted to hold you, you're leaving, you're leaving. Very straightforward, but John just took it here and there and everywhere. And the problem was, most of the time, I couldn't understand what he was singing. And my songs have never been about that. My songs have always been about words that are straightforward, easy to understand, and maybe you can relate to them. You can't relate to it when somebody's going, it's impossible. I mean,
I constantly said to him, but you know, you're not singing the tune. He'd say, I am. I said, no, you're singing a variation on the tune. What you don't realise is the public have heard the tune at the beginning of the song. Halfway through the song, you're doing an improvisation on the tune. So they don't know what you're singing. You know what you're singing, but they don't.
I don't know. John has his style, but it just didn't fit Uriah Heep as far as I was concerned. And it ultimately became the main reason why I finally just decided to leave.
Feelings was one of the songs that we had done or we recorded for the last album before Uriah Heep and myself split. I always felt it was a good song. It has been changed in the meantime, I think, and done on a slightly different way, but the original version of it has always been one of my favourite songs anyway.
Well, either you don't give a damn or you don't even care to pretend. Are you once very far, do you know it's not coming to an end? Oh, feeling those feelings, empty feelings, praying, hoping, needing, just when I wanted to hold you, you're leaving,
It just has a certain feel to it, has a flow to it, and it just has all the ingredients of a good pop song, I think.
I think Feelings was a very good song. Again, it was a pop song. I think it fits into the same general category as a song like Love or Nothing. I think we performed it very well. What it lacked was the essential Heep ingredient. We allowed it to be taken away from being a straightforward, straight-ahead, melodic pop rock song, and it turned into a straightforward, straight-ahead, melodic pop rock song with vocals that were virtually unintelligible and interrupted the energy of the song. That's what really happened.
Feelings is an example of the poppy direction that the band occasionally were veering in at this time, and where there's a rare piece of film where they appeared on a Granada television variety show, which is quite a classic.
With the GE minor chord structure and feel to it, it certainly gives it a poppy feel. A wonderful harmony guitar introduction on this particular song. It's evident that they were being pressurised after Free Me to deliver more and more stuff in this pop style. It's not one of my favourites, but from this era, I think it's one of the better ones.
Sloman never gets to grips with it. He always feels uncomfortable. He always feels like he's living in the shadow of what he's trying to emulate more than anything else.
John Lawton sang it much closer to the original melody, and so I think the song has a lot more energy because of that. When you break up a melody and interrupt it in the way that John Sloman used to do, then what you do is you pull away a lot of the energy from the song, or you distract people's hearing.
So Sloman's caught in this no man's land between trying to emulate Lawton and failing, and trying to set a new style and standard for Heep and failing. So if you really want to hear what Feelings is all about, it's not the version that Sloman did.
Really, the whole of Conquest is a highlight. The compositions are of a uniformly high standard, and it has its own unique sound. It's a really, really good record.
Musically, there are moments which really work on Conquest. Unfortunately, then the vocals let it down. No Return, Carry On, which really pump out the driving atmosphere. You've also got Out on the Streets, which is something of a prog rocker, and It Ain't Easy, which is slightly more laid back, and it's probably the one track on the album which really fits Sloman very well. Had they had a different vocalist, had they held on to Lawton, you get the feeling that maybe things would have been different. However, it turns out to be a patchy album, and with the exception of It Ain't Easy, really an album that doesn't have one song that everything comes together rather well.
Well, you've got to be deaf not to really understand that the true musical highlight of the album was Trevor Boulder's bass playing. All the way through, the bass performances are exemplary. Won't Have to Wait Too Long, for example, is absolutely fantastic. No Return is great. Mick's guitar solo on Out on the Street is fantastic. And actually Trevor, who wrote and sang the lead vocal on It Ain't Easy, again showed how much he was forging a presence within Uriah Heep, which he does to this day.
Musical highlights. Do you want me to be honest? The gaps between the tracks.
I don't think there is one.
It's a well-recorded album. It's a fantastically recorded album, and the playing on it is absolutely superb. You know, I've gone in and mixed and remixed stuff in the last 10 years on this album. No one can say it wasn't played well. No one can say it wasn't constructed well, but the singing was absolutely wrong for Uriah Heep.
It's not a successful album. I'm sorry to say. Again, I produced it. Oh no, I'm the executive producer on it, so who did produce it?
For me, the highlight, the absolute highlight of the Conquest album was getting it finished and being done with it. Because it was not an enjoyable project to work on for me at all. And I had pretty much made up my mind that it was the last album I was going to do, and subsequently following the Conquest tour, that was when I decided to pack it in.
The band with John Sloman didn't really quite know what they wanted to be. They'd lost their focus completely. Hensley seemed to be locked into his own world. He was playing well, but seemed to be far removed from the rest of the band.
I felt so totally separated from everything in the band and everyone in the band. It was hard for me to work up any enthusiasm normally. The only way I worked up enthusiasm was by doing immense amounts of drugs or something, and that's no way to carry on at all.
Mick Box seemed to be uncomfortable because he knew it wasn't working properly. He had a very strong rhythm section, and Chris Slade had been brought in on drums, who was an excellent drummer, formerly with Man for Man, and was to go on to be a member of AC/DC briefly. And of course, he still had Trevor Boulder there. And John Sloman didn't really ever convince up front.
For me, John Sloman brought some excellent compositions and some great work in the studio, but on stage he really, really struggled with particularly the Byron era material. He just couldn't deliver the old material on stage, and some of the live recordings from that era are frankly embarrassing.
And there is a complete live recording which I've mixed very recently, and that live recording has a lot of the classic Heep numbers sung by John Sloman, and it has a lot of the songs that ended up on Conquest, obviously sung by John Sloman. And the best way to summarise this is the songs that John Sloman recorded for Conquest live are interpreted extremely well. The classic songs, to me, they don't work.
It's difficult for any singer to walk into the shoes of someone so established as, say, a David Byron. So it's maybe unfair to judge him on his performance of those songs. I think one should judge him on the performance of the songs that he did with the band, such as Carry On, and his performance on these was great.
Nobody equalled David Byron's antics on stage. I mean, he was a terrific showman. And again, you know, the trouble is the band are constantly looking back at what they used to do rather than going forward. So they didn't get a replacement who was a better showman than David. They got someone who wasn't nearly as good and wasn't even trying to do what he used to do.
So I've seen John Sloman in Holland, and I don't think it was a very good performance, really. It wasn't Uriah Heep anymore.
Had Heep run out of ideas by this stage? Well, as an outsider looking in, I would have to say yes. I think it was time for a long break to sit back and take stock of the situation.
Actually, I don't think so, because if you listen to the material that was recorded from Fallen Angel through 5 Miles, and there are some stunning tracks there, they could have plundered the vaults and come out with another album's worth of songs.
By this time, the band really wasn't interested in ideas. I think, you know, we had gone through that whole situation with Lee being fired and Chris Slade coming in and so on and so forth. It was just so completely dysfunctional at that point. And I certainly wasn't interested in giving my full energy and enthusiasm to it.
If you go to a Uriah Heep gig today and it's only got 2 people in it that were in the original band, the songs that they are still trading on were all written by Ken Hensley. And Ken, whatever you say, wrote it down on a piece of paper, a few words, a few chords, a few sketches of the melody. But those were the songs that were successful. And once you threw that out the window, you threw everything out the window with it, really.
So I think that we just ran out of everything. It wasn't just ideas, I think we just ran out of energy, enthusiasm. We certainly ran out of cohesion. It was doomed at that point as far as I was concerned.
Day after day, I feel this way, that I need to be moving on. You know I depend on you, don't get me wrong. I throw the dice, I play the game, I hope we get along. Even then, I won't be fooled again.
I think with the departure of Ken Hensley, it appeared that Uriah Heep had run out of steam, but it's a real tribute to Mick Box that he was going to lock himself away, gather his energy, and just round the corner would see a Bominog and a whole new chapter.
Hensley's ideas were way out of date. Mick Box clearly had what it took to take the band forward. He was being hampered and held back. Once Hensley left the band, it was as if the shades came off, the shackles came off, and Heep moved forward.
We've always said, you know, we're very proud of our history, but we need to keep moving forward in many different ways, you know, to keep us vibrant, and I think that's the important thing.